peux-tu m'expliquer, en mots simples, ce que c'est que les faux souvenirs lorsqu'il s'agit de violences faites sur des enfants?
Alors le terme faux souvenir est un argument qui est souvent pris par les avocats de la défense, enfin les personnes qui vont soutenir des adultes qui sont mis en cause par des enfants qui témoignent de faits d'abus sexuels ou d'agressions sexuelles la plupart du temps, ou de violences, mais souvent c'est de nature sexuelle, qu'ils ont subi dans l'enfance. Alors je dis l'enfant, parce que même si c'est un adulte de 40 ans qui témoigne, c'est l'enfant blessé qui témoigne. Donc les faux souvenirs, c'est quand il y a des choses qui ne plaisent pas à d'autres sur cette dimension-là, qui sont alléguées, qui sont dites, et à ce moment-là, en face, les mises en cause vont dire « Ah, mais ce sont des faux souvenirs ».
Et ça, c'est la nouveauté depuis quoi, une dizaine d'années? C'est-à-dire on se sert des faux souvenirs à tire-larigot?
Alors on se sert des faux souvenirs pour disqualifier la parole des enfants victimes.
Mais à qui profite ce crime en fait?
Ça profite à tous ceux qui violent, qui agressent sexuellement des enfants et des personnes vulnérables.
Ça veut dire qu'ils ont le bras long alors?
Ça veut dire qu'ils sont très bien introduits, du terme à un double niveau, dans différents milieux, dans différents endroits, ils peuvent avoir du soutien. Il faut une certaine puissance en fait pour pouvoir faire valoir tout ça, pour approcher, pour publier des articles avec des biais méthodologiques. Donc oui, c'est pas n'importe qui peut mettre en avant ce type d'argument.
That a number of people, including some in high places, wanted to keep secret. The case against Mr. Bubbles. In that report, parents named Tony Derrin as the man who had sexually assaulted their children. Derrin's wife ran the kindergarten they attended. Tonight we investigate another crucial aspect of this disturbing case. You'll remember police listed 17 young victims, and more than 50 criminal charges were eventually laid. But when the Mr. Bubbles case went to court, not one of the children was called to give evidence. The charges were thrown out, and Tony Derrin was set free. One of the key Derrin witnesses was a hired gun from the United States, a psychologist named Ralph Underwager, who says he's an expert in child sexual abuse. He testified that the children's evidence had been contaminated, and that they were too young to know what the truth was.
You're a bastard.
No, I'm not.
You're a bastard.
This is Ralph Underwager, psychologist. He was paid $25,000 and gave crucial evidence in favour of Tony Derrin. Evidence which helped Derrin walk free.
Jocelyn said that they got undressed and that they got into a bathtub that was full of bubbles and that they played in the bathtub.
Did Mr. Bubbles ever get in the bath himself?
Yes, he did.
She
said that he got in without any clothes on.
They'd get undressed and get in the bath while he had a shower. He had a shower before he hopped in the bath with them.
Mr. Bubbles?
Yes.
Always the same story. 3- and 4-year-olds being lured into bubble baths with a man who sexually abused them.
Having examined them and talked with them, our unit's convinced that those children were sexually abused.
Absolutely no doubt.
No doubt at all.
That's the evidence Professor Kim Oates wanted to give in court, but he was never asked. As head of the Child Protection Unit at the Camperdown Children's Hospital in Sydney, he's known around the world as an expert in detecting child sexual abuse. So we have 18 children who were examined, 5 of whom your staff say were definitely sexually abused, and all of them from the same preschool. This is Jocelyn's medical report from the Children's Hospital, and it's very clear. There had been trauma specifically directed at the genitalia and led police here, the kindergarten the children attended, SeaBeach Kindergarten. The children told parents and police how they were taken from here for parties, special parties, hosted by Mr. Bubbles. This is Debbie's medical report. Once again, it was positive. There was sexual abuse.
I just, totally spun out on that because I would, at that point, had been trying to tell myself that no, this wasn't happening, it wasn't true, who would interfere with my child?
Do you know Mr. Bubbles?
Yes.
This reenactment is from the official police transcript.
Did Mr. Bubbles touch you between your legs?
On my toes.
Yes, did he touch your toes?
I put some things in his body and he put some things in my body, but I didn't want him to.
Cindy's medical report confirms she was abused. The doctor found signs consistent with traumatic dilatation of the anus.
I held her in the lineup at Monavale Police Station, and she identified the man out of the 7 people in that lineup as Mr. Bubbles.
Joe, can I just show you a photograph? Is that the man that Jocelyn identified?
Yes, it is. It's Mr. Bubbles.
And it's also...
Anthony Darren.
The police constable showed the photos again and she said, yes, there's the bubble man to that particular photo.
And that man was?
Mr. Darren.
This is Baroko Courthouse, Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. In 1972, Darren was brought here charged with the aggravated assault of 2 young girls. He'd interfered with them in a swimming pool, something Darren admits, and both charges were proven. There's no doubt scores of questions remain unanswered in the Mr. Bubbles case, and some of them relate to Ralph Underwager, the expert witness Tony Darren paid to testify on his behalf. Ralph Underwager was imperative to Tony Darren's defence. As a supposed independent expert, he testified that the evidence of the Bubbles children had become contaminated, and they were too young to understand their duty to tell the truth. But here in America, we've certainly discovered Underwager's reputation and credentials aren't all they're cracked up to be. Mr. Peters, are professional witnesses like Ralph Underwager dangerous?
They can be very dangerous when they...
Jim Peters is a senior attorney with the National Centre for the Prosecution of Child Abuse. He's investigated Underwager for the past 3 years.
Underwager is presented as a scientific observer, when in fact, from our perspective, more often than not, he's there as an advocate.
And anything but independent.
Anything but.
Well, he is someone who makes his living going around the country and testifying against children in child sexual abuse cases. He says the same thing in essentially every case, which is every...
And Anna Salter knows what she's talking about. A PhD from Harvard and a master's degree in early childhood. She says young children can be believed.
I mean, this is consistent with the literature. If you look at what is the best legal textbook in the country today on children as witnesses, Child Witness Theory and Practice, John Meyer says clearly children as young as 3 can comprehend the duty to tell the truth.
And this man is a highly respected legal scholar in America.
I think he's fairly clearly the chief leading scholar on child sexual abuse in the country.
6 American states have given Dr. Salter a grant to check Underwager's methods in court. And what did she find?
That he isn't accurate. That what he says in court does not necessarily fairly represent the literature.
He distorts the facts.
Frequently. Sometimes he quotes specific studies, and he's frequently wrong about what the studies say.
So we thought we'd get Dr. Salter to analyse the evidence Underwager gave under oath at the Mr. Bubbles hearing, where he testified his qualifications had never been questioned. But in an American case, the Swan case, this is what the court said about Ralph Underwager.
The court remains convinced the psychologist did not have the qualifications to testify as a doctor. The trial court ruled that the psychologist's proposed testimony was not proper because there was no indication that the results of the doctor's work had been accepted in the scientific community.
Now, the second incident in the Mr. Bubbles case was where Underwager said that 90% of accusations against child molesters are wrong. Now, is that backed up scientifically?
No, that's gobbledygook. I don't know of any study that would support that.
So while Underwager was being rejected here in America, he had no such trouble at the Mr. Bubbles hearing in Australia, where he testified that the children were too young to tell the truth. Do you think Underwager has got a lot to answer for over the years?
I think so. I think a lot of children have suffered at his hand. That children who probably have been abused have been put back into situations where they're likely to have been molested again.
I think that Underwager must have trouble sleeping.
Why don't you sit down and talk about
You are
all
to
your
leave.
facts,
You
all
are
this
to
research
leave.
that
You are
you
to
quote.
leave my home.
Mr. Underwager, you have
You are to
researched
leave my home.
and quoted
I am
research
not willing to
inaccurately
continue.
and distorted it for
I
years.
am not
and you
willing
know
to
it.
continue. You're a bastard.
No, I'm not.
You're a bastard.
I just love children.
And you're a bastard. To come here under false pretenses.
Not at all. Some say that you go to court under false pretenses, Mr. Underwager.
You leave my home. Your people can leave now. You go out the door now.
Questions getting a bit hard, were they?
You go out the door now.
I would like to ask you about your qualifications. In the Mr. Bubbles case, you said that your qualifications had never been questioned in relation to the Swan case.
You go out the door now.
You told an untruth in the Mr. Bubbles hearing.
You go out the door now.
You don't want to answer that?
I'm telling you to go out the door now, or I'm calling the police.
I think you've shown your true colours. We should leave. Thank you, Mr. Underwager. Appreciate your time. Definitely don't want to continue the interview?
I'm 61 years old Saturday. And I think you are one of the most dishonorable men that I have ever met.
That's what a lot of clinical psychologists say about you. You should be aware of that.
I am fully aware of that.
Ralph Underwager has testified for the defendants in about 400 child abuse cases. We wanted to question him about his performance in some of those and about other matters too. But, as you've seen, he didn't give us the chance.